Wondering who are these guys? I'll introduce the crew of STS-7. Commander Bob Crippen, pilot Rick Hauck, mission specialist John Fabian, Sally Ride, and Norman Thagard. And Cripp.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate such a large group coming out today. We're looking forward to it. If we can keep weather like this, we're certainly ready to go on Saturday. I think the Kennedy launch team has done a super job once again and proven that they can turn around a vehicle faster than we've ever done it before. And we're looking forward to getting airborne just as soon as we can. Why don't everybody say hello? Rick, step up the bike.
Sure good to be back, and we'll look forward to being back in about 9 days, or maybe 10.
Sally?
Rick said that pretty well. I don't think I can add anything. Sure, thank y'all for coming out.
It's always been good to come to KSC, but I think we have special reasons for thinking that this is a little bit better than normal. Thanks a lot.
It's good to be home in Florida, and although I usually hate to leave it, I guess I'll be glad to leave it at least on Saturday. It's good to be here.
Thank y'all very much.
The astronaut flight crew of Bob Crippen, Rick Hauck, John Fabian, Sally Ride, and Norman Thagard are presently in the room in the astronaut quarters ready for breakfast. Commander Bob Crippen is in the center of the group, all of them wearing striped t-shirts this morning. A number of other people joining the astronauts for breakfast, which has a large cake with the patch which was designed especially for the STS-7 crew, which is always baked by the manager of the astronaut office here at the Kennedy Space Center, Nancy Gunner. Bob Crippen, commander of the 7th flight of the Space Shuttle, will be the first astronaut to have flown on the shuttle for the second time. He was pilot on the first Space Shuttle launch just slightly more than 2 years ago. Born in Beaumont, Texas, he grew up in nearby Porter. He's a captain in the U.S. Navy, married, and has 3 daughters. Crippen has also been selected as a commander of the STS-13 crew, which will be the first mission to recover an ailing spacecraft from orbit, the Solar Maximum mission. Rick Hauck, who is the pilot on this mission, he joined the astronaut corps in 1978 after a distinguished career as a naval aviator. He served in Vietnam and was named the Outstanding Navy Test Pilot in 1972.
Astronaut John Fabian is one of 3 mission specialists on STS-7. His main responsibility is the deployment of the 2 telecommunications satellites.
His mission specialist, Dr. Sally Ride. Of course, the focus of media attention around the world has been on Dr. Sally Ride, who emphasizes that she's a mission specialist and a scientist who just also happens to be a woman. However, as the first woman to fly in space on board a U.S. spacecraft, history is undoubtedly going to focus on that as well as her accomplishments to date, such as a doctorate in physics from Stanford University. She's married to Dr. Stephen A. Hawley, who also is an astronaut. And she was also selected in 1978 and served as capsule communicator for the STS-2 and STS-3 missions. During this mission, she's going to have a number of vital tasks to perform, such as launching the Palapa satellite and deployment and recovery of the SPAS-1 spacecraft, honors that she'll share with fellow mission specialist John Fabian. Dr. Thagard has the distinction of being the first medical doctor to fly, and he will be taking a close first-hand look at the effects of motion on human in space. Prior to starting his medical studies, he had been a captain in the Marine Corps and a naval aviator, flying 163 combat missions in Vietnam. He then came back to the States and took his Doctor of Medicine degree from Texas Southwestern Medical School in 1977 and was an intern when he learned of the call for new astronauts and was selected for that program in 1978 also.
On Space Shuttle 7, now scheduled for early summer, the remote manipulator system or robot arm will be used to deploy and retrieve a payload. And for the first time, an orbiter is scheduled to land on the 15,000-foot shuttle landing facility at the Kennedy Space Center. While the prime objective of STS-7 is to deploy the Canadian satellite Telsat and the Indonesian satellite Palapa, included also are 2 scientific payloads on board. Dr. Ride explains.
In the cargo bay, we're carrying a pallet of material science experiments called the OSTA-2. Sits out right about in the middle of the cargo bay. It's non-deployable, and it's our only non-deployable payload in the bay. We'll be doing what's called proximity operations. We're going to use the RMS, the arm, grapple a payload that's in the bay, the SPAS-01, which is a German-made pallet that has its own attitude control system of 12 small thrusters, so it can maintain its own control outside the orbiter. We're going to make it a free flyer, activate its attitude control system, and then Cripp and Rick are going to fly the orbiter away from it while John and I control the SPAS from inside the orbiter and monitor the SPAS.
This is Shuttle Launch Control, T-minus 2 hours, 28 minutes, 15 seconds and counting, and our astronaut crew has just left their crew quarters, moving into the elevator to come down to the first floor of the ONC building for their trip to the pad. Commander Bob Crippen leading the way, and everybody crowding into the elevator so that they can get down to the bottom. At this point, there are no constraints to the launch. A number of employees flashing their cameras as the crew comes out, led by Commander Bob Crippen. John Fabian, the tallest of the group, once quite worried that he was just too tall to be an astronaut. With the roomier spacecraft, that's not a problem. Dr. Norman Thagard, bringing up the rear, has the distinction of being the first medical doctor to fly into space. And the crew will be going out to the pad in a recreational vehicle, type vehicle this time. The last trip of the old Astro van, which has taken astronauts to the pad for many years, has been completed now. Commander Bob Crippen now in the White Room, putting his Snoopy hat on, and then he'll be putting on his launch and entry helmet. During the first few flights of the shuttle, a full pressure suit was needed, and so the helmet's attached to that suit. However, nowadays, only coveralls are used, plus a special harness, which is used for restraint and emergencies. The countdown clock at T-minus 2 hours, 5 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting. This is Shuttle Launch Control. T-minus 17 seconds and counting. The body flap and speed break are in launch position. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We go for main engine start. We have main engine start. And the ignition. And liftoff. Liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Roger your roll, Challenger. Houston now controlling. Mission control confirms roll maneuver started. Ground time on all AM channels 217 20 seconds. Left looks good. 25 seconds. Roll maneuver completed. 30 seconds. Challenger now 1 nautical mile in altitude. Throttling engines down now to 75% as programmed.
The launch was pretty much like all launches.
Keep saying that.
Well, since you started, Sally, why don't you tell what it felt like there?
Well, actually, I was pleasantly surprised because I thought that the simulator really prepared us well for it. We have a motion-based simulator.
Yay.
Yay for the simulator. That simulates what you're supposed to feel on launch. It gives you the vibration and a lot of the shaking that you get during first stage. And I thought it was very representative. All the way up through SRB separation. It simulated the tail off, the deceleration that you get at the separation of the solids.
Mark 1 minute 25 seconds. Challenger now 11 nautical miles altitude, 8 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 3,700 feet per second.
From my standpoint, being my second flight on the shuttle, it seemed like it was much smoother. That's probably because I wasn't nearly as excited. Maybe I was a little calm this time. But it really is a super machine. Performs well.
It's really nice to have an experienced tour guide there, too, because he could tell us what was going to happen.
And I think everybody in the cockpit was having fun.
21 nautical miles downrange. Standing by now for solid rocket booster separation. Roger, set. 12 minutes, 12 seconds. Confirm good solid rocket booster separation. The booster is falling away now.
And it also simulated very well the really smooth ride that you get during second stage on just the main engines. And I guess that we've all commented that that part of the ride is just like having a big electric motor behind you. It's that smooth, really smooth.
This is right after we open the payload bay doors, and I believe we're passing over Mexico, the coastline of Mexico there, and it's just to show you what it looks like as we're tailed down to the Earth, passing over both land and sea areas. Clouds were very beautiful.
There's a poor old CDR trying to get in his chair.
We wanted to get shots in here of each of the crew people, so you'll see us go from one to another as we're maneuvering around the flight deck.
This just proved we all were there. John's coming up to find out where we're at. We spent an awful lot of time looking out those overhead windows.
In Challenger, Houston, we have a TV picture now. It really looks beautiful.
Okay. We agree. We got a nice view of Hawaii.
Roger, we understand. We saw some good views of the Earth through your cameras as well as yourself.
Much better from this perspective.
The crew deployed 2 communication satellites. A Canadian satellite to be used for one of the world's first direct-to-home pay TV services, and an Indonesian satellite. It would increase high-speed data transmission and telecommunication service to that country's remote island locations.
Hey, Sally's going to show you this morning visual results of the PAM deploy yesterday on the ANIK satellite, and she's going to control it here from the aft station. So if you folks are ready to look and record, she's ready to send it down to you, and we'll chat at you while we're doing it.
What you ought to be seeing pretty soon is the start of mechanical sequence, and you can see the send shield opening up on the ANIK. You saw a little bit of the jump there that we saw yesterday.
We saw that.
And you can see it opens up fully here with no real problems, and the thing that would happen next in this sequence would be the removal of the restraints, and we're going to jump ahead just a little bit here on you and show you the tail end of that in the spin-up.
And right now the restraints are just coming out, and it's about to spin up, and there it goes.
Of course, we spin it up to 50 RPM. Yesterday we saw 51.0 RPM at the top of the cycle.
Looks good.
It's taking about 30 amps on each of the motors, and then when we got stabilized out, it was taking 6 to 8 amps. Looked real good.
Okay, and we decided that once you've seen it spin up, you've seen it spin up, and now we're going to cut ahead to just before deploy and show you the last few seconds of terminal sequence and show it actually going out of the bay.
Okay.
And of course, what's going on in the meantime there is they're getting the spacecraft configured and ready for its flight. And the ANIK.
Okay, and we've got it on now. You ought to be seeing a picture of it spinning up in the bay from camera Alpha.
Looks great.
And there she goes.
That's a shift over to the Delta camera, and you can see the KU band antenna there very briefly. Right about now, as I was watching this thing go out, John was yelling at me, "Throw the last switch, throw the last switch."
We've got the switches, no problem. All of us agree this is by far the best simulation of a PAM deploy that we've yet seen.
Yeah, that's the best one we've seen in a while.
The visuals are a lot better, and we appreciate you keeping SimSoup behind his curtain where they couldn't put in any malfunctions.
If you look in the aft cockpit, you'll see that the doc here has his stethoscope out.
Okay, we got that now.
I think he's healthy, though.
We're getting a lot of glare off of Norman's head.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Wasn't nice, Big John. Wasn't nice.
It's hard to set up the lighting for Norm. To have a comm problem here of some kind. That could happen with any one of us. Except Sally.
Yeah, I was going to say except Sally.
That should be a little bit better.
We've all decided to be nice to Norm, though.
John, you want to talk?
This is the beginning of the sequence of the deployment of the Palapa telecommunications satellite. The sun shield is opening there in the back, and the ANIK would have been in front of this, but we had deployed it earlier. And after the sun shield is open, we withdraw some restraints and begin to spin the telecommunications satellite, getting it ready for its deployment.
Copy, and we got a good picture.
And there's a spin going now. It spins at 50 revolutions per minute. And Sally and Cripp had the best view of this, looking out the back window.
But it really is a nice vehicle to launch from every respect. Worked just like a champ.
Okay, and what you're seeing now is the very end of terminal sequence. It'll be popping out any minute now. And same thing on Palapa as with ANIK. We really felt a kick when it left the bay.
Did that faint vibration continue through the deploy, or did it stop when you deployed?
And she's just about getting ready to pop here. There she goes. And as you can see, it's very clean, going right up the tail. And about 2 feet per second differential velocity between the satellite and the orbiter. And Cripp was at the back window here and grabbed a 16 millimeter camera. As it went out of view there, he took this picture out the overhead window.
And you could watch it for a very long period of time. I don't know, Sally, how long do you think we had it in view?
I don't know. It was several minutes, though. We could track it.
And there it is at even greater distance. About 45 minutes after deployment, it fires a rocket that sends it up towards its geosynchronous orbit. And we understand that Palapa and ANIK are both in their operational orbits at this time and doing extremely well.
Commander Crippen and Captain Hauck seated at the front and get ready for the burn post-deploy. Of course, Commander Crippen is a captain, too. Get that Navy stuff mixed up. Second business, they say.
We can tell you're steely-eyed from here.
What you just saw there was the OMS ignition, which we used for the set burn to move us a little bit away from it.
And the oscillation that you saw at the end of that picture was oscillation in the camera out in in response to the OMS burn. That's the CFES, and what I was doing there was taking out one of the samples and putting in the next sample. Those are the little syringes that contain the samples that then flow up that column, and they're collected up at the top. That's the computer that goes with the CFES. Rick said, do something that looks interesting.
I don't know, but every time she'd come up to the flight deck while she was supposedly operating CFES, and she'd be up there a while, and this thing would go beep beep, and she said bye, and she would go back down there to tend to it again. There was
Okay, first of all, we've got two cameras set up down on the middeck. I don't know if Rick told you or not. One of them is a wide view that's looking straight at the CFES, and one is a close-in view. From the wide view, I think you can see the bottom part, which is where the syringe goes in. From the close-in view, you can probably see the syringe right now. We're running 6 samples through the next couple days, and each sample is contained in a syringe. At the beginning of that sample collection, we put the syringe down here in the bottom. It goes right in the bottom, and then the sample is driven out by a pump, and eventually gets flowing up into the chamber. And of course, the purpose of the experiment is to send the sample material up through, feed it up into the buffer, which is flowing from the bottom of the column up to the top. Or what on earth is the bottom to the top? To us, I'm not sure what way it is anymore.
I guess right now it's top to bottom.
We've sort of gotten used to this zero-G business. This is kind of fun. In any case, it takes any one piece of the fluid nearly 10 minutes to get all the way from the bottom to the top, so this isn't really a high-speed activity. As it's flowing up, we put an electric field on it across the fluid, and that separates the materials in the sample. And the point, of course, is to separate out the protein material that we're interested in. And different compositions, different proteins get separated by a different amount. So by the time it gets up here to the top, to the collection tubes, the various proteins are sort of spread out across the top. And by collecting in, I think what's about 200 different tubes up here, you collect a different material in each tube. And we won't be getting around to collecting the first sample for another hour and a half, but when we do, we'll be opening this trap door here and putting a collector tray in, and it drives some needles down into some of these tubes in here and collects the material through the top.
Well, thank you kindly for that all that description. You make an excellent tour guide of science on the shuttle.
Isn't science wonderful?
Recently, the crew of Flight 7 had an opportunity to visit the President, supplied us with one of his favorite candies, some Jellybeans straight from the White House that we've been enjoying up here.
Looks tasty.
There's Captain Hauck making a famous grab.
The Astros could have used him last night. They lost another one.
And Big John. It's a little easier to make the catches here.
That's firm.
Get the dock in the picture here.
And John, if you could have INCO call up the flight deck camera, we've got the CFES streams.
And that's what you got right now.
Yeah, we're seeing that right now, Sally. And we can, in fact, see the separate streams.
Okay, I was just going to give you a little bit of description of the streams for the CFES people. It looks like we're seeing a few standing waves, oscillations, but not wavering of the stream. It looks like the streams are kind of sinusoidal, but they don't seem to be wavering back and forth. And we'll check the exit tube numbers for them once the sample gets to the top. It's not quite up to the top yet.
We copy, and you can power down the SCA.
Okay, thank you. Meanwhile, John's over here maneuvering the arm to the grapple position, and we're still holding up on our attitude maneuver so we can get this drift check.
One of the neat activities we had to do was we did what we referred to as proximity operations, that is flying around the vicinity of the spas.
Shuttle mission control, the picture you're looking at now is on the end effector camera on the remote manipulator system.
SPAS is an acronym for Shuttle Pallet Satellite, a unique reusable space platform built by the West German aerospace company Messerschmitt Balkov Blom, with generous financial assistance from the West German Federal Ministry of Research and Technology.
Best wishes to those folks from MBB who built the spacecraft. It's a real...
In addition to having American television and film cameras mounted on SPAS, 10 experiments belonging to the West German government, the European Space Agency, and NASA were on the platform. MBB wanted to validate the satellite's design and prove experiments could be operated while SPAS was free-flying. NASA wanted to show the remote manipulator system could handle the 2.5-ton payload.
And we're getting ready here for the deployment on the Proximity Operations Day of the SPAS satellite. And this is lifting the SPAS out of the orbiter.
You can see a few of the cameras on the top of the SPAS, 16 millimeter, 70 millimeter, and a couple of TVs that were used to provide some of the spectacular photography and TV that you saw.
Okay, if they didn't mind for very briefly again, I was going to put you back on camera Delta.
Very good.
The SPAS was an ideal satellite to work with. It was extremely stable and worked very well throughout the entire flight.
So did the arm. You can tell from this picture that the arm is doing exactly what it's being commanded to do. It's pulling the SPAS straight up.
This is John doing the release on it. John, you want to come?
Right, this is the first release, I guess, and we've squeezed the trigger to release the end effector on the remote manipulator arm from the fixture on the SPAS and then pulling the arm back away from it.
Meanwhile, the nervous CDR was sitting there with his hands on the controls in case it started to diverge, and we went ahead and started separating from it.
These are the payload bay cameras. The orbiter is in darkness right now. Crosses the terminator into sunlight in about 3 minutes. This picture here is being taken from the shuttle pallet satellite.
Good luck with the rendezvous radar at 900 feet.
Beautiful.
And we're coming up towards the terminator. We might be able to get you some TV here shortly.
We've been following you. We got a TV.
It's mission control challenge now about 100 feet below the shuttle pallet satellite and performing the R-bar separation, moving the vehicle down and away from the free-flying shuttle pallet satellite. There's Commander Bob Crippen, barely distinguishable in the flight deck as he looks through the overhead panels.
We're setting out about 200 feet at this time, and that's from a 16 millimeter camera that was located on the SPAS.
That's a beautiful shot.
And we hope you like the arm.
We see that.
Mission control, the 2 payload assist modules are visible in the aft section of the payload bay, and the remote manipulator arm deployed, looking like an enormous numeral 7 protruding from the forward section of the payload bay.
On the SPAS, and it's the first time I've been able to pick up visual up on the thing. So if we can time all of our rendezvous such that we got a full moon.
During R-bar separation, this shows a point at which the Challenger was roughly 200 feet beneath the shuttle pallet satellite.
When we got down to 200 feet, we started going out in front and then coming back up to exactly in front of it.
Estimates this picture to be taken, to have been taken about 1,000 feet, at 1,000 feet distance between the shuttle pallet satellite and Challenger.
We're about 1,000 feet out now, flying directly in front of it. The orbiter is a super vehicle as far as flying in close vicinity to another satellite on orbit. From a pilot standpoint, you couldn't ask for any better performance.
I'm sure Dwayne is sitting there listening. The radar is really working out great as far as range and elevation and so forth. Line of sight rates wander around a little bit, very similar to what they've done in sims. They're helpful, but not great.
We set out there for a couple of revs, and it was very easy to manually control that, and this shows us starting back in.
You'll see two lights. That's the payload bay lights, and look for the RCS jet firings.
This is looking down at the orbiter.
And now we'll see some from inside the cockpit.
Those are the forward RCS.
You'll see the approach that we're making for the grapple, and both vehicles were just about as stable as anybody could want them. And when you're flying a big machine like the orbiter, which is 200,000 pounds, you do it nice and slow, which is the way we made the approach. John, you want to comment on your grapple here?
And here's the grapple to retrieve the spas after that first phase of proximity operations, and it's a very manageable task done from inside the cockpit using hand controllers, and you can see very, very slight oscillations there, probably about a 1/4 inch in amplitude as we close in on the grapple fixture getting ready for the capture, and there it is.
Crippen provided a real stable platform, and I took it in about halfway here and then shifted over to vertical rate control so that the final maneuver into the payload would be a little smoother than we can get with the course control. And then continued on in toward the grapple fixture itself. And the payload was, in fact, very stable, and as we approached the grapple fixture with the end effector, then Sally puts the spas into a free drift mode, and Crippen commands the orbiter into a free drift mode so that neither one is firing thrusters at that time. And then we continue to close in the last couple of feet, with Crippen looking out the overhead window to assist in all of the ranging as we get in closer. As you can see, it's a very smooth operation coming in. The RMS very easily controllable, and the spas itself is a very stable platform. And after we've squeezed the trigger and grabbed it, then it rigidizes itself and snugs up against the end effector per se, and we're ready to do whatever comes next. Got 5 very happy people. We're looking forward to this afternoon's little excursion with the spas, and we're happy that the folks down there has worked on this little problem with the temperature to allow us to do that. We're hoping it's going to cool down properly where we can get a full phase 2 of the Fox-Ops in.
Roger, we feel pretty good that'll allow us to get the full phase 2 in.
Great deal. Seems like it's mainly the electronics that's causing it to heat up more so than the sun.
We concur.
So turning it off sounds like the right thing to do.
This is starting of the second portion of Proxops. So we had lunch after the first day. We put after first phase, Sally and John had put the spas in a sun-shielded attitude because it had been warming up during the early portion, and spas here is still on the end of the arm, and Sally's maneuvering it back out to its release position, and what you're seeing is the spas TV as she maneuvered it to the position.
You also see the sun glint off the water down there.
The first release that I did was a simulated backup release, and that went really smoothly. That was something we were a little concerned about the drift rates that the arm might give the spas, but the rates were really low, and we headed right off into the plume survey.
Purpose of the plume data take, as you know, is to fire jets at the spas and use post-landing measurements from the spas to see how much upset there was due to the jets. And we're looking down from the spas now during that phase of operations, firing one of the nose jets up near the black nose and looking for any motion. There was very little detectable motion except during one of the aft maneuvers. Here we're flying up and over the spas in what is known as the inertial approach. We're reorienting the orbiter's axis to align with the proper grapple fixture axis on the spas. We're looking through the COAS there, the optical sight, and that was one of our aids in making sure that we're maintaining position on it. We're out at about 200 feet, maintaining that radius as we fly around it. You can see we've passed up and over the spas and almost going around a little bit behind it now.
We had purposely maneuvered the spas out of the attitude that it had been in for the entire flight. And then the point of this was to maneuver the orbiter as well to line up its axes with the spa's axes. And we'd like to compliment NASA on the orbiter model that they got for us to take these pictures.
We were told this morning in our management brief that the camera that took those 16 millimeter from the spas was used on Little Joe early in the space program years ago.
Not at White Sands.
This is the approach and grapple for the end of phase 2. And you can see slight oscillations in the arm, but it's really doing just about exactly what I'm commanding it to do. And it turned out to be a very easy task and just no problem at all.
SPAS was rebirthed for return to Earth.
They sure are nice. I've been told that some crews in the past have announced that we deliver. Well, from Flight 7, we pick up and deliver.
We certainly hope so.
There's Dr. Thagard doing a little medical stuff.
And this is a collection device looking for microorganisms about the orbiter. It's a little fan that pulls them in and separates them.
We're all asked about privacy on board with 5 people and both sexes, and we did have a little privacy curtain over the head area, and this is Rick describing or hooking it up, so it'll give you an idea what it's like. And that worked very well. The old CDR trying to get some exercise. That treadmill works very well from trying to simulate 1G again, but it's enough to, it's not exactly like running here on Earth, but it makes you work up a sweat and use your legs a little bit, which is what the intent is.
This is just to prove that I got on the treadmill too.
Sally was working very hard, and I was up near the pantry, and we found a bag of cashews. You had to be quick to grab the cashews, because Sally was...
I wasn't going to let those get away.
Right.
So it looks like we're a no-go for KSC.
Shuttle Flight 7 was to be the first landing of an orbiter at Kennedy Space Center, Florida. But bad weather conditions did not allow it. Challenger would touch down instead at Edwards Air Force Base, California, the alternate landing site.
Roger.
During the period of communications blackout, usually lasting about 15 minutes, temperatures on the vehicle's surface reach their peak. The temperature of the red-hot glow seen through Challenger's front windows was about 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit. One astronaut described the view as like being inside a furnace.
This is actually a still shot that was taken during entry by John, and he did a super job of capturing what it looks like outside the windows. That's just about the perfect color of the globe.
Roger, any last minute updates, Dick?
Negative, everything the same as before.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are they targeted for 1-5, I'm assuming?
That's affirmative.
Okay. I'll say once more, we're away to come to California.
Roger that.
Coming right down the Silicon Valley.
The wind at Dryden directly from the south at 10 knots. Challenger's airspeed 255 knots, altitude 34,000 feet. Touching the Hauck now. 18 miles to touchdown. Out of 30,000 feet at 257 knots. Beginning the wide sweeping left turn around the Hauck.
We spent most of the time in the darkness during entry. The vehicle had no surprises. It flew just like we anticipated it would. Our cross range for the entry we flew was a little over 730 miles, nautical miles, which is the max that a shuttle has done thus far. We did end up deleting some entry maneuvers because of that cross range, but we picked up the most important ones. This is showing us coming in over the heading alignment circle. I took manual control just about the time we were overhead Edwards flying manually. This is a camera that was mounted over my left shoulder because they said they wanted some shots of what it looks like in the cockpit.
Challenger turning final now. Right on the nominal track. Flight Dynamics Officer Willis Bolt reports.
Shows you what it looks like out of Rick's window. The vehicle is super from a pilot standpoint. We had a heads-up display mounted in both Rick's and my windows that we were utilizing, and it allowed us to control our management energy just like we wanted it to.
Surface wind 180 at
10,000 feet at 282 knots. On glide slope on center line. .6,500 feet, 281 knots.
That shows the aim point that we're using for the landing, which is just this side of the lake bed. It's a rectangle, not the triangle you're seeing. And going into the pre-flare maneuver, we had a bar of lights sitting down to the left of the runway we also used as a visual aid. Rick put down the gear at 200 feet, which is where we'd planned. And like most way I like to fly when I'm over a lake bed is I like to get down low fairly fast and then just kind of hold it there till it gets ready to, gets down to the proper airspeed. It was just like flying our shuttle training aircraft. As far as I was concerned, it handled very nice. We waited till we touched down about 205 knots and we waited 180 and we derotated to get the nose down the deck, and we basically used light braking hardly any braking at all.
And Challenger's back home, back to Earth. The unofficial touchdown time in mission elapsed time, 6 days, 2 hours, 24 minutes, 10 seconds. That time is unofficial.
The touchdown was so light that John and I wanted to call the convoy to find out whether we had touched.
Right. I had to pay her to say that.
I got some coming too then.
Okay. Even though we were using light braking, the total runway utilized was 13,000 feet, which would have meant if we'd been landing on a 15,000-foot runway, I would have still had no problem getting stopped.
Roger, we see that. Congratulations, a great-looking landing. And from the entry team, got some good news. Good news is the beer is very, very cold this morning. The bad news is it's 3,000 miles away.
That's what I was afraid of.
And I'll hand you over to the good guy Gardner here, and he'll talk to you about your post-landing.
Roger that.
It is still a super machine. There really is. Even managed to get back to the center line of the runway after I had to roll all that way.
Crew disembarking now. All 5 crew members doing a walk-around inspection of Challenger.
Welcome home.
Thank you very much, sir.
And now this is the second time. You know, I was going to meet you in Florida, but then you decided to land in California. But again, you didn't stop and pick me up off the South Lawn like I asked you to.
I'm guilty, sir.
You were there because you were the best person for the job. And I think that sets a standard that's going to be followed for men and women in the force from now on with these experiments. People are picked neither because of nor in spite of, but simply because, like all 5 of you, you were the best for this assignment.
The thing that I'll remember most about that flight is that it was fun, and in fact, I'm sure it's the most fun I'll ever have in my life.